Are we here? Can you hear me okay? Morning. Good morning, Maranatha Baptist Church. So, enjoying the piano playing? Yeah, that's my sister Dorothy. Yeah. Glad to have her here playing for us. Oh, you are not willing to tell stories. You are not willing to tell stories. No. 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 Okay. So, huh? Yes, she brought me a bacon cooker. Isn't that a blessing? A new one. All right. Yes, yes. I've got yet another way to make bacon. All right. All righty. Well, folks are coming in. All right, we're gonna let the kids go to Sunday school class. Everybody ready to go? You guys head out. The teachers take you out there, Sunday school class, and we are gonna start our. Boy, I'm enjoying this music. It's fun, fun, fun. Are you having a good time? You having too much fun? Well, it isn't over yet, so you have to pull them guitars back out again. All right. So for those of you that are still in here, let's open our Bibles. Did you all get your Sunday school lesson? Anybody not get a Sunday school lesson? Wants one? Put your hand up. You did not get one? Okay, so Brother Tom's back there. I think he's passing them out. Go get one. Anybody else need a Sunday school lesson? Okay, so we are continuing today the questions of Pilate. There's quite a bit here, and I wanted to back up a little bit and look at this. John chapter 18. And then I have a treat for you today. I have something I'm excited to share with you. So it's good to see everyone here. Great Sunday morning, isn't it? Beautiful sunshine, and finally we didn't get any rain. Finally. I don't know who Luke Bryan is and why he thinks rain's a good thing, but somebody needs to shut that guy up. You guys don't even know what I'm talking. Some of you do. All right. All right. All right. That rain, it's finally, my mud's starting to dry up, so I was hoping for a little bit of, it needs to be rehydrated. And you notice how the ground's just cracking all of a sudden? It's like, we're dry. What's going on with the water? Are you guys awake? All right, just checking. All right. Just checking. You're waiting for the hammer to drop, huh? I know it was a depressing weekend, wasn't it? Oh, my goodness, with all of the stuff in the State House. Wow. We're going to stay off of that right now. Right now. I might say a little bit about it in the morning service. We'll see. We'll see. You never can tell. So, huh? You had to bring it up. I'll be honest with you. I was in the morning service. I had a message ready to go, and God told me no. So He changed it. So I was sure God told me no. I don't want you preaching that right now. And then, man, I was like, I want to rip the hide off of this one. And He said no. So we got something else for you this morning. I think it'll help you. I think the message this morning will help you know in morning service. Will help you know what to do, what we need to do right now. Because I know everybody's frustrated with what's going on. Would you guys elect me to Senate when Ryder retires? No, I'm kidding. I don't know. My wife would probably divorce me if I ran for Senate. Hey, go. Thank you, Brad. I appreciate that. All right. So, John 18, and we're going to look at verse, let's see, we're going to start with verse 33. And actually, I'm not going to read this whole thing. I want to give you 6 questions that Pilate gave to Jesus. Jesus came before Pilate. He was a Roman governor there over Judea. And he was very curious. And the Bible recounts an interesting story here. These questions that he had of Jesus. I want you I want you to see that he was really struggling. He felt like Jesus was a Jew, he was a Hebrew, and it was their deal, the Jews' deal, and all of a sudden Jesus flipped it on him, and he began to realize that Jesus was more than what he was trying to say. And it's interesting to see in Pilate's attitude, the attitude of the world today. Because there are people out there that say to the Christians, live and let live. You guys do what you want to do. I've got my thing going on. You guys go on to church. I'm going to go to the beach. You do what you want to do. And you guys are nice people and all that. Let me do my thing. But then what happens, and that's kind of the way Pilate was, but as he started asking these questions of Jesus, he began to wonder, and Jesus flipped some things back on him, some questions back on him, and then Pilate began to be afraid because he started, the Bible actually says he feared. What's interesting, there is, in the 1800s, late 1800s, there was a fella, a scholar, that got to thinking about the fact that if Jesus really was as big a deal as the Bible says he was, that in history there would be some records in the Roman Empire's archives of how Jesus interacted with the Roman government. And so he went on a search, and he discovered that at some point in the history of Rome, the Roman Catholic Church became the clerks of the Roman Empire. In fact, I don't know if you guys have ever seen pictures of the Vatican Library, but the Vatican Library is so vast that you have to know what you're looking for to find anything. You don't just go in there and let's look at books. I mean, there's just millions of books in there of all languages that they have amassed over the centuries. Many of those books that they found and letters are records from the Roman Empire. So he went on a search in the Vatican Library looking specifically for the writings of Judean governors who would send their reports back to Caesar. And he found a letter from Pilate, Pontius Pilate, to Caesar, a report of this man called Jesus of Nazareth. And I've got it with me this morning, translated in our language. Are you interested? No? You don't want to hear about it? Okay, so I'll share some of that with you, okay? Some of Pilate's words about Jesus. This is not biblical, but they are in the Roman archives of the Roman Empire that the Vatican owns. And they translate it. That's fascinating stuff. Those kind of books and things are out there. Histories are out there. But they're not inspired any more than Plato or Socrates or anything like that. They're not inspired scriptures, but they're fun to read. And they're there. So I'll share that with you. So, and that'll give us kind of a little background, too, of what Pilate was thinking when he asked these questions. Okay? You interested in that? Okay, so here's John 18. Let's look at verse 33. This was the first question Pilate asked Jesus when he was brought before him. He said, Then said Pilate unto them, Take ye him and judge him according to your law. The Jews therefore said unto him, It is not lawful for us to put any man to death, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die. Then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again and called Jesus and said unto him, here it is, the question. He's disinterested. He's looking at Jesus. He said, Okay, are you the king of the Jews? Art thou the king of the Jews? That was the first question he had. And Jesus' answer to him completely redirected Pilate's question back to himself. And Pilate gets defensive. What happens? Jesus, he says, art thou the King of the Jews? And Jesus answered him, sayest thou this thing of thyself, or did others tell it thee of me? So he's asking Pilate, okay, so you're asking me a question, but is this a question you're asking because someone else wants to know? Or what do you want to know about this? And he brought immediately, this is the idea that Billy Sunday used to preach about Jesus being a personal Savior. The thing that Jesus always does every time he interacts with anyone is he puts it back on you. Is what do you think of me? That's what he says. You see, you can blame, listen to me, you can blame the church. You can blame other Christians for how you live your life. You can blame everyone else. But Jesus doesn't let you get by with that. He wants to know, what do you think? Several years ago, I don't want to get too far into this, but just by way of illustration, several years ago, my wife and I bought a house, and we found out through a series of events that one of those was I got sued by a bank, and I didn't know about it till it was in the newspaper. And one of the guys in my church called me and said, "Did you know Chase Bank is suing you?" And I'm like, "What? Chase Bank is suing me? Why?" He said, "Because you defaulted on a loan." I said, "I haven't defaulted on any loans." Well, come to find out, the people I bought the house from had gone out and bought other houses in my name with my Social Security number, 5 of them, my name and my wife's, and they defaulted on the loan, but it's all in my name. I didn't even know I owned the house, didn't have a loan with Chase. So come to find out, they had sold my house to me, and they actually didn't sell my house to me. They sold me the trailer. It was a double wide, but they didn't sell me the foundation. I thought I was paying for that. They still owned it. They didn't sell me the house. I mean the land. That was on a 3-acre lot. The 3-acre lot they still owned so that they could borrow money off of it. And I thought they'd done all the paperwork, and I thought So anyway, long story short, I ended up getting called into a grand jury, and they had taken at that time I was getting paid $150 a week from the church as my salary. And I had given them, they'd wanted a copy of the check so they could prove to the bank that I was getting a salary. And they had taken it and whited it out and wrote $25,000 in it, looking like the church had paid me $25,000. Well, that check had already cleared for $150 through the bank, but the bank that they got the loan from didn't know that. The bank they got the loan from, they faxed that check to them. Looked like I had gotten $25,000 from the church. It was a mess. They messed my credit like you cannot believe. And it was bad. We went through, when I got called before the grand jury, I had no idea that had happened. And there was a detective that thought I was involved in the scam. And so they tried catching me in a lie before about 90 people in a grand jury. And they said, if we prove to you that these people are crooked, will you believe me? Believe it. And I said, if you prove to me they're crooked, because I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. I had no idea. These people actually came to my church. So, it was kind of a mess. So one of the other families in our church also bought a house from them, and they ended up joining about 18. They did a class action suit and sued them. Those people ended up in jail. The man that owned the company, he ended up dying eventually, but they went to jail for 3 years before they came to Illinois and started another house sales company. Unbelievable. They knew how to shut down an LLC and start another one quick as a wink. It was amazing. But for years and years, I was having we had some financial struggles because I had to buy that house for 3 different times. From 3 different, I had to go to the title company and buy the land separate, and I had more money wrapped up in the double wide than you can imagine, trying to get it all settled. So for a long time, I blamed them for the struggle I was having with my finances at that time. This happened in 1999. One day I woke up and I realized, do you know what? What they did to me has no effect on the fact that I'm overspending on bacon. Has no effect on that. All of a sudden realized, my personal finances, I can stop blaming them because how I bought and overspending, I was living outside of my means. I mean, I got to stop doing that. And when I realized that, all of the problems, all I was blaming them for, I was able to buy a car. I mean, the banker has a file like that on me. But they knew who I was, and they knew I paid my bills. And so they gave me a loan anyway that I needed. We ended up getting out of that house and buying another house completely separate. And that whole fiasco was finally behind us. It took us 15 years to get it behind us. We were still here. We were here when we finally closed it all up. Unbelievable. 15 years getting out of that mess. But I realized that it wasn't, my personal finances were not their fault. It was my fault. And I told you all that just to give you an illustration. Jesus has a way of doing that. We always want to blame somebody else. Somebody else can do you dirty. They can do bad. But the bottom line is, your life is the sum total of your decisions. Hello, do this. You know what I'm talking about, right? It's true, isn't it? Huh? And so you need to stop blaming, and that's the first thing Jesus did to Pilate. Are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus is like, well, wait a second. What about me and you? I love how he does that. Makes it a personal decision, a personal thing. Look what verse 35. Pilate answered and said, am I a Jew? See, he gets defensive. Thine own nation and the chief priests have delivered thee unto me. What hast thou done? This time Jesus gave him the answer he was looking for, but not without first getting his attention. First he's like, now we're talking. Now I'll tell you what you wanted to know. He said, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. So he's looking at Pilate and he says, look, Pilate, don't worry. I'm not going to take your throne. I'm not taking Caesar's throne. My kingdom is something different. Well, Pilate kind of understood that. And that caught his attention. Verse 37, you could see Pilate almost stopping and looking at him and saying, art thou a king then? Now, no longer is Pilate concerned that he's going to take over or usurp his throne. He's just wanting to know, okay, are you royalty? Where are you from? And you can see the question, and I'm going to give you this in a second from these other writings that he had. You can see he had interacted with Jesus before, and at this point he's trying to figure out, okay, so who are you? And where are you from? Explain yourself. Art thou a king then? And Pilate, the Lord has caught his attention. Verse 38. Well, let's look at verse 37. Jesus' answer, thou sayest I'm a king, to this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Everyone that is of the truth heareth my voice. So here, Jesus dodges the question just a little bit. And he said, my kingdom's not of this world. He didn't go back and repeat it. I find myself repeating myself a lot. I tell the same stories over and over again because I got one life, And those are the only stories I know because that's the ones I lived through. But Jesus doesn't repeat himself. His words are not superfluous in any way. So he had already answered, I'm a king. Now he goes on, he says, this is the reason I came into the world. What did he come into the world for? To bear witness to the truth. Listen, I want to tell you something. There's never been a time so obvious that truth has fallen in the streets. Isaiah talks about it. Truth has fallen in the streets. It's unbelievable the lies that are being fostered on us. Unbelievable. And we don't need to get into that right now. You guys know what they are, right? Hal's sitting there, sick 'em. You guys, come on. Don't get me going. All right. So you know what they are. Seriously, the lies that are being told, it's unbelievable. And I'm absolutely furious with the Senate, what they did about the abortion bill. I'm absolutely furious. The only good news about this is that maybe we'll get some new people elected. Maybe some folks will wake up and realize what's going on in our state house. Nothing good. Jerry's they're wanting to raise 38 cents on our gas, as if it doesn't already cost enough. 38 cents more to do what? 38 cents more to do what? You think they're going to get it in the roads? I doubt it. They already have enough money to fill the the holes in the road. They got enough money. They squander it. It's going to Chicago. I know it's going to Chicago. What a mess. What a mess. But anyway. Here's what I wanted to say. The Romans were known for discussions of philosophy. Socrates and Aristotle were held in high regard. Plato was held in high regard. Listen now. They wanted to know truth. And here's what you need to understand about Jesus Christ. Do not ever be afraid of the facts. Are you hearing me? Never, ever, ever be afraid of the facts. One of the problems that we have in our culture is people don't talk to each other. I'm not talking about you talking to your friends. I'm talking about talking to people that disagree with you. People don't talk to people that disagree with them. And I think you should be kind and gentle and willing to talk to anybody about any subject and listen to their viewpoint. And I'll tell you what, if you'll listen to their viewpoint, we might have more success in our culture. Truth, never forget this. Truth can stand scrutiny. You can study truth. You can look at truth. You can bake truth. You can pull it out. You can look at it, stick it back in the oven. It's always going to be truth. 2 + 2 always equals 4. There's no slide rule on that. I mean, it doesn't change. You know what I'm saying? Facts are facts. There's a lot of facts that are covered over. They're covered over by our U.S. government. They're covered over by special interests. A lot of facts. There are facts right now that are out there in our culture that are being completely covered over. Don't get me started. We don't have time because I want to get you to Pilate's letter, okay? But you know what I'm talking about. A lot of things. I mean, pick a subject. People's agendas are what's important. Jesus is not that way. And listen to me, Christians, we ought to be purveyors of truth. Look, in your personal life, listen to me now, don't be a manipulator. In your personal life, don't fudge the facts to get what you want. Hello? Be honest and truthful in all of your dealings. That's what a Christian should be, right? Be the honest car dealer, right? That serves you well, doesn't it? I buy cars from him for that reason. Be the honest car dealer. Be the honest person, computer person. Be the honest person. Truth is what Jesus wants. And He said, that's why I came. It's like shining a light on the facts. People need the truth to know how to behave, to know which way to walk. Verse 9 of chapter 19 now we see Pilate asking this question. What happens after Pilate comes out and he says, I find no fault in him? The chief priests and the officers, verse 6, saw him. They cried out, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. Pilate said unto them, Take ye him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him. And Jesus answered him, We have a law, and by our law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God. Look what it says in verse 8. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was more afraid. Here's a guy in the world he's not a Christian, he's not a Jew, he doesn't worship Jehovah. But when they said he makes himself the Son of God, he's all of a sudden, he knows there's something wrong. There's something off here. And it says he got more afraid. Verse 9, he comes back into Jesus, into the judgment hall, and saith unto Jesus, Whence art thou? But Jesus gave him no answer. He said, where did you come from? Why did Jesus not answer him? Because he had already answered him. For this cause came I into the world, bear witness to the truth. My kingdom is not of this world. And Pilate's like, oh, now he's freaking out. Where did you come from? Who are you? What's going on? And Pilate responds, knowest thou not that I have the power to crucify thee? Verse 10. Here Pilate's trying to regain control, but he fails. Jesus answered, thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Verse 12 says, and from thenceforth Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, if you're Caesar's friend, you won't. So Pilate was more afraid of Caesar. He was more concerned about Caesar than he was about Jesus. He didn't know what to do. He was caught in the hot box. Now here's part of the letter that he sent to Tiberius Caesar, who was the Caesar in Rome at that point. And I'll read sections of it. We don't have time to read it all. But here is where Pilate first encountered Jesus. So this, what I'm going to read to you, came before this interchange. So when Pilate goes into this conversation, this was not the first brush he'd had with Jesus, okay? Here's what he said. I was even informed that some misfortune would befall him. He's talking about Jesus, of the Nazarene. He said, I was informed that some misfortune would befall him, that it would not be the first time that Jerusalem had stoned those who called themselves prophets. An appeal would be made to Caesar. However, my conduct was approved by the Senate, and I was promised a reinforcement after the termination of the Parthian War. Being too weak to suppress an insurrection, I resolved upon adopting a measure that promised to restore the tranquility of the city without subjecting the praetorium to humiliating concession. I wrote to Jesus requesting an interview with him. Hang on a second. That was something else I wanted to read later. I want to back up. This was the first time he was found. Pilate lived secluded. He said, I lived secluded from the masses, for I did not know what these priests might influence the rabble to do. He's talking about the instability in Judea. Among the various rumors that came to my ears, there was one in particular. This is where I wanted to read. There's one in particular that attracted my attention. A young man, it was said, had appeared in Galilee preaching with a noble unction, a new law in the name of God that had sent him. At first I was apprehensive that his design was to stir up the people against the Romans, but my fears were soon dispelled. Jesus of Nazareth spoke rather as a friend of the Romans than of the Jews. One day, in passing by the place of Siloe, where there was a great concourse of people, I observed in the midst of the group a young man who was leaning against a tree, calmly addressing the multitude. I was told it was Jesus. This I could easily have suspected, so great was the difference between him and those listening to him. His golden-colored hair and beard gave to his appearance a celestial aspect. He appeared to be about 30 years of age. Never have I seen a sweeter or more serene countenance. What a contrast between him and his hearers with their black beards and tawny complexions. Now, have you ever heard that Jesus was blonde? Okay, so let me tell you something else. I was doing some research on this, and I found there's a picture in the catacombs in Rome, underneath the Roman streets. There's a picture on the wall of an early artist that would have seen Jesus. It's a picture of him, and he has short, curly, blonde hair in this painting. Interesting, isn't it? Short, curly, blonde hair. And here Pilate says in his writings that his hair was golden. Interesting, isn't it? So what's the Solomon head of Christ? Who's the hippie dude? The white hippie dude. Who's that? It's not Jesus. Right? Well, that came from a Roman priest had a dream in the middle of the night. This Roman priest happened to be a homosexual. His name was Solomon. He painted this head of this long-haired white Jesus, and he said this is who Jesus was. Jesus wasn't. He was dark-complected with blonde hair. Okay, that's interesting, right? Unwilling to interrupt him by my presence, I continued my walk, but signified to my secretary to join the group and listen. My secretary's name was Manlius. He is the grandson of the chief of the conspirators who encamped in Etruria waiting for Catiline. Manlius had been for a long time an inhabitant of Judea and is well acquainted with the Hebrew language. He was devoted to me and worthy of my confidence. On entering the praetorium, I found Manlius, who related to me the words Jesus had pronounced at Siloe. One of the rebellious Jews, so numerous in Jerusalem, having asked Jesus if it was lawful to give tribute to Caesar, he replied, "Render unto Caesar the things that belong to Caesar, and unto God the things that are God's." Where have you heard that before? It was on account of the wisdom of his sayings that I granted so much liberty to the Nazarene. There you go. Here's how Jesus was able to walk around and have all these crowds. Pilate allowed him to. He said, "For it was in my power to have had him arrested and exiled to Pontus," but that would have been contrary to the justice which has always characterized the Roman government. I extended to him my protection, unknown perhaps to himself. He was at liberty to act, to speak, to assemble and address the people, and to choose disciples unrestrained by any praetorian mandate. Should it ever happen, may the gods avert the omen, should it ever happen, I say, that the religion of our forefathers will be supplanted by the religion of Jesus, it will be to this noble toleration that Rome shall owe her premature death, while I, miserable wretch, will have been the instrument of what the Jews call providence and we call destiny. This unlimited freedom granted to Jesus provoked the Jews, not the poor, but the rich and powerful. It is true Jesus was severe on the latter, and that this was a political reason, in my opinion, for not restraining the liberty of the Nazarene. So, he goes on to talk about the insurrection and the fomenting rage that had occurred. And so he decided that he was going to invite Jesus to talk to him. So he invited him in to talk to him. He said, I wrote to Jesus requesting an interview with him at the praetorium. He came. Now you say, why isn't this in the Bible? Have you guys read John, the book of John? The book of John says the world could not contain the books of all the things Jesus did. Okay? There's a lot of other things that are said about him. A Roman historian, I have some words from him where he talked about Jesus raising the dead, and the Jews called him an Egyptian necromancer. That's how they said he was from Egypt, because he was in Egypt for a little while. And they said he picked up the art of dealing with the dead, and that's how he had all these miracles. That's how they explained him away. Okay? Interesting, huh? He said, I wrote to Jesus requesting an interview with him at the praetorium, and he came. You know that in my veins flows the Spanish mixed with Roman blood, as incapable of fear as of weak emotion. He said, when the Nazarene made his appearance, I was walking in my basilica, and my feet seemed fastened with an iron hand to the marble pavement. I trembled in every limb as does a guilty culprit, though the Nazarene was calm as innocence itself. When he came up to me, he stopped, and by a signal sign he seemed to say, I am here, though he spoke not a word. For some time I contemplated with admiration and awe this extraordinary type of man, a type of man unknown to our numerous painters who have given form and figure to all the gods and heroes. There was nothing about him that was repelling in his character, yet I felt too awed and tremulous to approach him. Jesus, said I unto him at last, and my tongue faltered, Jesus of Nazareth, for the last 3 years I have granted you ample freedom of speech, nor do I regret it. Your words are those of a sage. I know not whether you have read Socrates or Plato, but this I know, there is in your discourse a majestic simplicity that elevates you far above those philosophers. The emperor is informed of it, and I, his humble representative in this country, am glad of having allowed you the liberty of which you are so worthy. However, I must not conceal from you that your discourses have raised up against you powerful and inveterate enemies. Nor is this surprising. Socrates had his enemies, and he fell victim to their hatred. Yours are doubly incensed. Against you on account of your discourses being so severe upon their conduct, against me on account of the liberty I have afforded you. They even accuse me of being indirectly leagued with you for the purpose of depriving the Hebrews of the little civil power which Rome has left them. My request, I do not say my order, is that you be more circumspect and moderate in your discourses in the future, and more considerate of them, lest you arouse the pride of your enemy, and they raise against you the stupid populace, and compel me to employ the instruments of law. The Nazarene calmly replied, Prince of this earth, your words proceed not from true wisdom. Say to the torrent to stop in the midst of the mountain gorge. It will uproot the trees of the valley. The torrent will answer you that it obeys the laws of nature and the Creator. God alone knows whither flow the rivers of the torrent. Verily I say unto you, before the rose of Sharon blossoms, the blood of the just shall be spilt. Your blood shall not be spilt, said I with deep emotion. You are more precious in my estimation on account of your wisdom than the turbulent, proud Pharisees who abused the freedom granted them by the Romans. Jesus shook his head and said with a grave and divine smile, when the day shall have come, there will be no asylums for the Son of Man, neither in the earth nor under the earth. The asylum of the just is there, pointing to the heavens. That which is written in the book of the prophets must be accomplished. That was what he said. When they brought Jesus before him, he says this. This is part of what he recounts. I had taken a wife from among the Gauls who pretended to see into futurity. Weeping and throwing herself at my feet, she said to me, beware, beware, and touch not that man, for he is holy. Last night I saw him in a vision. Well, this is recounted in the Gospels as well. He was walking on the waters. He was flying on the wings of the wind. He spoke to the tempest and to the fishes of the lake. All were obedient to him. Behold, the torrent in Mount Kidron flows with blood. The statutes of Caesar are filled with geminide. The columns of the interium have given away, and the sun is veiled in mourning like a vestal in the tomb. Ah, Pilate, evil awaits thee. If thou wilt not listen to the vows of thy wife, dread the curse of a Roman Senate. Dread the frowns of Caesar. By this time the marble stair groaned under the weight of the multitude. The Nazarene was brought back to me, and I proceeded to the halls of justice, followed by my guard, and asked the people in a severe tone what they demanded. The death of the Nazarene was the reply. For what crime? He was blasphemed. He was prophesied the ruin of the temple. He calls himself the Son of God. Roman justice, said I, punishes not such offenses with death. Crucify him, cried the relentless rabble. The vociferations of the infuriated mob shook the palace to its foundations. Isn't that interesting? So it's all kind of the same story that we get in the Gospels, but this is additional things. Here's what he said. Listen to this. During the crucifixion, he said, so dreadful were the signs, these dark clouds lowered over the pinnacle of the temple. Wait a second. Often in our civil commotions have I witnessed the furious anger of the multitude, but nothing could be compared to what I witnessed on this occasion. It might have been truly said that all the phantoms of the infernal regions had assembled at Jerusalem. The crowd appeared not to walk, but to be borne off in whirls of vortex, rolling along in living waves from the portals of the Praetorium, even into Mount Zion, with howling screams, shrieks, and vociferations such as were never heard on the seditions of the Pannonia or in the tumults of the Forum. By degrees the day darkened like a winter's twilight, such as had been the death of the great Julius Caesar. It was likewise the Ides of March. I, the continued governor of a rebellious province, was leaning against a column of my basilic, contemplating athwart the dreary gloom these fiends of Tartarus dragging to the execution the innocent Nazarene. All around me was deserted. Jerusalem had vomited forth her indwellers through the funeral gate that leads to Germanica. An air of desolation and sadness enveloped me. My guards had joined the cavalry, and the centurion, with a display of power, was endeavoring to keep order. I was left alone, and my breaking heart admonished me that what was passing at that moment appertained rather to the history of the gods than that of men. A loud clamor was heard proceeding from Golgotha, which, borne on the winds, seemed to announce an agony such as was never heard by mortal ears. Dark clouds lowered over the pinnacle of the temple, and setting over the city covered it as with a veil. So dreadful were the signs that men saw both in the heavens and on the earth that Dionysius the Areopagite is reported to have exclaimed, either the author of nature is suffering or the universe is falling apart. Whilst these appalling scenes of nature were transpiring, there was a dreadful earthquake in Lower Egypt, which filled everybody with fear and scared the superstitious Jews almost to death. It is said Balthazar, an aged and learned Jew of Antioch, was found dead after the excitement was over. Near the first hour of the night, I threw my mantle around me and went down into the city toward the gates of Golgotha. The sacrifice was consummated. The crowd was returning home, still agitated, it is true, but gloomy, taciturn, and desperate. What they had witnessed had stricken them with terror and remorse. I also saw my little Roman cohort pass by mournfully. The standard bearer veiled his eagle in token of grief. They carried on the standard, they carried an eagle up there. That's what the Roman centurions would do. And he veiled it. I've never seen that anywhere else. I can believe it. I overheard some of the Jewish soldiers murmuring strange words which I did not understand. Others were recounting miracles very like those which had so often smitten the Romans by the will of the gods. Sometimes groups of men and women would halt, then look back toward Mount Calvary, would remain motionless in expectation of witnessing some new thing. I returned to the praetorium, sad and pensive. On ascending the stairs, the steps of which were still stained with the blood of the Nazarene, I perceived an old man in suppliant posture, and behind him several Romans in tears. He threw himself at my feet and wept most bitterly. It was painful to see an old man weep, and my heart being already overcharged with grief, we, those strangers, wept together, and in truth it seemed the tears lay very shallow that day with many whom I perceived in the vast concourse of people. I never witnessed such an extreme revulsion of feeling. Those who betrayed and sold him, those who testified against him, those who cried, "Crucify him, we have his blood," all slunk off like cowardly curs and washed their teeth with vinegar. As I am told that Jesus taught a resurrection and separation after death, if such should be the fact, I'm sure it commenced in this vast crowd. "Father," said I to him after gaining control of my feelings, "who are you and what is your request?" "I am Joseph of Arimathea," replied he, "and am come to beg of you upon my knees the permission to bury Jesus of Nazareth." "Your prayer is granted," said I to him, and at the same time I ordered Manlius to take some soldiers with him to superintend the interment, lest it should be profane. A few days after, the sepulchre was found empty. His disciples proclaimed over the country that Jesus had risen from the dead as he had foretold. As to its truth, I cannot say for certain, but I have made some investigation of the matter so you can examine for yourself. And here's what he said. You want me to stop now? We're over time. All right. Oh, okay. Give me a couple more minutes. Joseph buried Jesus in his own tomb. So when the great excitement arose about the sepulchre being found empty, I felt a deeper solicitude than ever. I sent for Malchus, who told me he had placed his lieutenant Ben Isham with 100 soldiers around the sepulchre. 100. He told me that Isham and the soldiers were very much alarmed at what had occurred that moment. I sent for this man Isham, who related to me as near as I can recollect the following circumstances. He said that at about the beginning of the 4th watch, they saw a soft and beautiful light over the sepulchre. He at first thought that the women had come to embalm the body of Jesus, as was their custom, but he could not see how they had gotten through the guards. While these thoughts were passing through his mind, behold, the whole place was lighted up, and there seemed to be crowds of the dead in their grave clothes. All seemed to be shouting and filled with ecstasy. This is also recounted in the Gospels, by the way. While all around and above was the most beautiful music he had ever heard, and the whole air seemed to be full of voices praising God. At this time, there seemed to be a reeling and swimming of the earth, so that he turned so sick and faint that he could not stand on his feet. He said the earth seemed to swim from under him, and his senses left him, so that he knew not what did occur. I asked him in what condition he was when he came to himself. He said he was lying on the ground with his face down. I asked him if he could not have been mistaken as to the light. Was it not day that was coming in for the east? He said at first he thought of that, but that as stones cast it was exceedingly dark. And then he remembered it was too early for day. I asked him if his dizziness might have come from waking up and getting up too suddenly. Sometimes it had effect. He said it was not. He had not been asleep all night, as the penalty was death for him to sleep on duty. He said he had left some of the soldiers sleep for a time. Some were asleep then. Yeah, I asked him how long the scene lasted. He said he did not know, but he thought nearly an hour. He said it was hid by the light of day. I asked him if he went to the sepulchre after he'd come to himself. He said no, because he was afraid that just as soon as relief came, they all went to their quarters. I asked him if he'd been questioned by the priest. He said he had. They wanted him to say it was an earthquake and that we were asleep, and offered him money to say the disciples came and stole Jesus. But he saw no disciples. He did not know that the body was gone until he had been told later. That's interesting, isn't it? Do you like that? Okay, this guy did a lot of research. This was discovered in the 1800s. Dr. McIntosh and Twyman, they looked at these manuscripts and these records and they found a lot of other writings. Of course, this was in all of the reports of Pilate to Caesar about all the various goings on in Judea. Isn't that fascinating? So he translated it into English, and they put it together in this thing called the article volume. If you're interested in it and you want a copy of it, you can probably get it on Amazon, the article volume. So pretty interesting stuff, huh? All right. So Jesus is alive. Pilate was stunned, and there are many, many, many recounted stories of that. What does that mean to us? It means some good things, doesn't it? Doesn't it encourage you a little bit when you look at the Senate and you think about all of that and they're doing their stuff and everything, and along comes Jesus and kind of rocks their world? Isn't that great? So, hey, He's in us, right? Greater is He that is in you than he that is in the world. The Bible says that if we get saved, the Holy Spirit of God comes into us. All right? All right. Take a break. Get some coffee. Come back for the morning service. It's going to be good.